Hello, my friends, and welcome to another episode of Carried by the Breeze, a podcast dedicated to the voices of the future, where you'll get to be part of the most honest conversations about self-development, spirituality, and holistic health. We're here to provide the space for visionaries and entrepreneurs with a burning desire to make a positive impact on the world. I'm your host, Carrie Breeze, and today I have the pleasure to host the youngest guest we had on our podcast, Soroush Mirghasemi. At just 20 years old, Soroush is the founder and spokesperson of the Young Nietzschean Club, and he's here to share his visionary ideas on strengthening communities through individual betterment. This fascinating conversation emphasizes the need to revive the human element that's been missing from our society, all while addressing the distinctive challenges faced by younger generations, such as isolation and the impact of technology on our human connections and authenticity. We delve deep into the Nietzschean unique perspective on morality, the art of crafting our character, and transcending social norms in pursuit of greatness. These principles are regarded as the key to resolving the critical challenges of our time, and we're here to discuss it all, from countering mindless consumption to addressing the pitfalls of escapism. This is a conversation you'll want to be a part of, as it covers a multitude of ways to build a better world for generations to come. Let's get started.
Hello, it's a pleasure to be here.
Pleasure to have you here. So, you happened to sort of walk into my life by complete accident. It happened when a friend of mine and I were walking down the street, just contemplating about the ailments and the troubles and the challenges that our world is currently facing. And I remember telling my friend that the answer and the key lies in the younger generation that needs to be educated and put together. And then by divine power, we have stumbled upon your brochure about the Young Nietzschean Club, and I understood that moment that I need to contact you ASAP. So I did, and here you are, and I'm very glad to have you here and to hear more about your mission and your vision towards the future. So tell us more about yourself.
As you mentioned, my name is Soroush. I was born in Iran, in Tehran. I'm 20 now, so I came here 5 years ago, thereabouts. I went to high school here, and then now I'm a university student. I study math and physics, more of a STEM person, I guess. But around the time where COVID started, I started reading a bit more out of that field. In Iran, the humanities is not as well appreciated, I think. So once I got here, I started reading. I read some philosophy, some political science, some sociology. Still getting into psychology, but that one's a tougher field to get into. But I started getting involved in activism, especially, given the new sort of political freedom that I have. I started mostly for climate stuff. I did some activism for Iran as well, try and get things a bit better over there as well. But so I've been around a bit, especially during the last 2 years. Then essentially, after I got more acquainted with all of those stuff, got more acquainted with the way the political climate works, and also a bit more with the challenges of being a young person. I'm an immigrant, so I do face a bit uniquer challenges, but
for sure.
there's stuff that I see in common online, in persons, everywhere. So I wanted to make I guess provide a space for people not only to get those sort of educations and get involved in that activism, but also to really try and better the individual aspects of life, because people tend to lose sight of that, I think, especially in those sort of circles, the activist circles. I wanted to have it sort of create a mutual thing of both activism, of being involved in community organizing, just trying to help the community get in a better place, but while simultaneously at the same time building yourself up and
A stronger you.
developing the resources to really
Yeah.
because at the end of the day, the community is nothing if not
The individual.
with individuals, made off of individuals and for individuals to prosper. So.
Exactly, precisely. So that's beautiful, and I love that you get to do that. But let me start with asking you, why Nietzsche? Especially for the folk that do not know a lot about Nietzsche.
Yeah, I can give a little brief summary, I guess. Nietzsche was a German philosopher in the 19th century. He was a contemporary of a few famous philosophers, one of them being Schopenhauer. But Nietzsche was unique in that he was a very individualist thinker. Like he almost like extremely transgressively so. He was known for questioning customs, traditions, the state, everything in between, even like
Critical thinker.
yeah, very, very much so. He was, I think if he was more influential during his lifetime, he definitely would have been a lot more criminalized or marginalized than he was. Unfortunately, he was a bit of a loner, a bit of a weirdo, you might say.
Like most of the geniuses are, eh?
Yeah, I guess he was a little, I mean, he suffered a serious mental breakdown at a very young age, and he never recovered from that. In his 30s, but before that, he just questioned the status quo. I guess you could say he questioned even like the moral fabric of the of Europe at the time, which was the Christian Church. But he wasn't. He was unique in that he didn't limit his criticism of morality to just Christianity. He really wanted to make sure that people understood like where these sorts of institutions come from, and also
understood the status quo.
Yeah, exactly. And then he wanted to show that a lot of the assumptions were not as valid as you might think they are. And now you might not agree with everything he says. I certainly don't, but I think it was a sort of, Nietzsche has this book. It's called Twilight of the Idols, How to Philosophize with a Hammer. It's all about breaking those idols with the hammer. And by breaking them, you can create something new. So by just taking a hammer to those sorts of things, you can create something new out of it, try and recreate a better status of how things are, I guess.
Yeah, so what is it about the Nietzschean philosophy that you don't agree with? Where do you think it could be improved on?
So Nietzsche was very elitist. That's a first thing that comes to mind. He really had it's Germany at the time where it's like right near where the modern Germany was not even a country back then. Until it was Prussia and Austria and the rest of the sort of Bavaria, other provinces, and then it was recently reunified into the First German Empire. So there was a lot of like nationalist fervor. Although Nietzsche himself wasn't very much of a nationalist, he really liked like aristocratic ideals. He kind of saw it as, which went with his individualism, because he kind of made this distinction between like the masses and then the aristocrat thinkers on top, who were educated, who knew what's best, who were able to explore themselves deeper and weren't bound by the same laws as the masses, I guess. And a lot of that is it's interesting. I appreciate the individualism of that, but there is this inherent assumption that there's not that same capacity within the masses or whatever. But that line has been blurred like such a huge by a huge amount in modern days. I think a lot of those assumptions that he made are not necessarily true. I there's still stuff to be discussed. That's why the club is not like a, okay, yeah, we've developed this philosophy, now you have to abide by it and learn it. And it's about discussion. It's about learning from things, criticizing it. That's why it's the Young Nietzschean Club. It's meant to be a criticism to bring forth like a more progressive, the young version of Nietzsche, as opposed to the old.
And it's ever growing.
Yeah.
Yeah, with
All
its ideas.
philosophy, all human thought is like that. Yeah.
So one thing that I love about Nietzsche, it's his idea, his concept of the Übermensch.
Mm.
I'm guessing that you know about
Yeah.
it, you read about it. So the Übermensch is the overmen, representing individuals who transcend societal norms and values to create their own moral code. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? Because basically, it is self-development. It is the betterment of the self of the individual in order to transcend and become better. So yeah.
Yeah, it's actually very fascinating. Nietzsche, after World War II and after Nazi Germany, Nietzsche was not very popular because his sister, who was like a huge anti-Semite, even though Nietzsche himself was not anti-Semitic, he in fact broke up his relationship with his friend Wagner for his anti-Semitism. He mentions it in Nietzsche contra Wagner, which is his other work. But his sister really tried to use his writing as a justification for her sort of insane bullshit. I'm gonna say just very plainly, but Nietzsche, the Nietzschean idea of the overman, it roots back to his theory on how morality itself evolved, especially the Christian moral framework, and it's all about so. Keep it brief, it was like there's this moral construct. It's called master morality. It was sort of the ruling moral idea of mostly. He makes the example of the Roman Empire, but it's meant to be the moral ideal of all the like ancient empires. And that moral ideal has a dichotomy between good and bad. So good is power. It's stuff that makes you powerful, knowledge, influence, stuff like that, and also virility. Even he really has a emphasis on that as well. And then bad is the opposite of that. It's weakness, it's meekness, it's even like cunning, I guess you could say, like stuff that's not very direct. The stuff
that's
that
not authentic and straightforward.
Authentic has other implications, but yeah, I guess you could say it's not. It's two-faced, I guess you could say. And under that moral framework, the masters would have been the rulers and the citizens of Rome and whatever, and then the slaves would have been those under like, there were literal slaves back then, so it would have been them. And then essentially what happens in Nietzsche's idea is that moral order gets subverted by the people who are oppressed by that system, because they couldn't gain power for themselves. What they ended up doing is reversing the moral dichotomy, and good became meekness, became humility, being humble, stuff that's and that's like the Christian moral order. And then the good in the previous incarnation became evil, being domineering, being wanting strength. But this is where a lot of people get it wrong. Nietzsche's argument isn't to go back to master morality. His idea is that master morality is better because it's more nurturing to human nature, to seek power, to it's like it rewards fundamental drives of human behavior, but it's also it inevitably gives birth to slave morality. But this idea of the Übermensch is someone who is neither master nor slave. He creates the new moral order where, sort of moral order in that it's no order. It's like an anarchy of sorts of morality. And now that sort of stuff is nuanced, and I don't necessarily agree with every part of it. I don't agree that we should I mean, I am an anti-realist in terms of morality. I don't believe it's literally like a metaphysical thing that exists. I think it's human laws and conventions. But I'm also not the type of to be a relativist and be like, okay, then whatever behavior is fine as long as you believe it's fine. And Nietzsche wasn't like that as well. Nietzsche himself, he literally is like normatively saying that the stuff that slave morality promotes isn't good. But he doesn't want it to be this rigid framework and like this guilt inducing sort of thing that exists in Christianity today, and in his argument movements that stem from Christianity, even if they reject like the theology of it. But yeah, that's the Overman essentially.
So let me see if I understand this correctly. So would the Ubermensch be a person that is more fluid in his morals, that practically takes from both worlds in order to be a more decent human being?
The Ubermensch, I mean, he intentionally keeps it vague because, first of all, he doesn't want it to seem like a prophecy of some sort, and also because he really emphasizes that like his works aren't like a template to better yourself. It's just a framework to think. And think for yourself, and that's the main thing that he promotes. But the Ubermensch is essentially someone who builds their own character. It doesn't even have to be a guy. I mean, maybe Nietzsche himself would have been emphasizing that it be a guy, but it doesn't necessarily have to. But it's someone who thinks for themselves, who builds their own character and becomes something greater. Essentially, it's not that like the greatness is just recognizable immediately. But yeah, that's sort of the idea.
So it's somebody who elevates themselves above what is currently accepted in society in terms of morals.
In many ways,
yeah. So let's talk about thinking for yourself. It's something that most of us don't do because we're so occupied with the media, and propaganda is all around us. We're hearing all kind of messaging from here and there, and we're consuming so much of it on a daily basis. So let's talk about the importance of thinking for yourself and having critical thinking as itself as means to be a better person, to be more connected to society, and be a better part of your community.
Yeah, I mean, it's critical because critical thinking. It's critical because it's just there is a paradigm that's been created. It's kind of been studied. You can read like Noam Chomsky's Manufacturing Consent, like books that talk about media as a machine that limits thought, essentially.
Exactly.
And I think like the way the world is going today, it really shows that what the allowable sort of range of thought that's been in public discourse, it's not enough to address the problems that we have today with climate change, with all these wars happening everywhere. And I don't think any modern like sort of school of thought necessarily has the correct answers. I consider myself more on the left. I do advocate for stuff that's traditionally seen as like goals within like left-wing political philosophy, but a lot of the methods and a lot of the behavior I see from the left in the modern day, I don't think is what it needs to be to arrive at the better solutions. And then on the other side, on the right, I see a lot of stuff that I think is distractions from the real issues. I think people are focusing on the wrong thing. But I mean, fundamentally, the problems are identifiable, I think, by most people. The methods to get there is just not, I guess, allowed in any ways within the public discourse. There's a lot of we have cast a mold for ourselves, and we really don't want to get out of it because that it would require too much
action, less talking.
And throwing away too much of what we think we know as true.
That is the hardest thing for a person to do. So I would guess that for a society, it's just this mission impossible. So basically what we have is problems that everybody sees, everybody accept that they need to be fixed, but then we have all these wings who are fighting each other on the solution, and nothing is being actually done. So you, as a young person that is just looking at the world and how everything is unfolding in front of you, what do you feel about it? Like, where is it that you think that we're failing as a society?
I mean, I don't want to be like apocalyptic about it, but climate change is literally on the
Let's
door. But
try and stay positive.
yeah. But I think on a like human level, I think we are
Hmm.
failing a lot. Like
Yeah.
our infrastructure, for example, is just not like built for human beings anymore. A lot of the social spaces that used to be like you know you would go and meet people, third places they call them in sociology.
Hmm.
A lot of that's just completely gone.
Yeah.
Um, like
We're more
base
isolated than ever.
Yeah, for sure. And everything is just built for cars and machines, and nothing is built for human use, and there are no places for social interaction. So, at those fundamental aspects of being a human, like interacting with others, interacting, I guess, with ourselves, even, there's so much. I mean, and this is going to sound weird, but there's just so much clutter that it just
Yes.
prevents us from at all even like doing internal dialogue properly.
Oh, for sure.
And then I think there's an over reliance on escapism because the modern world is not going
Hmm.
exactly very well.
No,
So
don't deal with reality. Just look at this TikTok. Look at it.
yeah,
Look at them
exactly. Yeah.
kitties.
Yeah. And it's because it's kind of part of human psychology. It's just so easy to get into those loops. So that's the individual thing we want to fix, and then the infrastructure and the political stuff that's all the political goals that we have to fix. And it's all about getting people connected, building systems that are properly conducive to human life. That's the main thing that's of importance.
Amazing, amazing. I love it. So let's dive deeper. Let's talk about the Young Nietzschean Club. Where do you guys come into the picture, and how is it that you think you can improve on how this world is unraveling?
um so the reason I really wanted to emphasize like Nietzsche and the sort of his political philosophy is I want the Young Nietzschean Club to be something that builds individuals and gives them the tools they need, and then from there they can do activism in the way that they want. Not that we don't do activism, but um, it's more about creating this symbiosis of individual and community. That's the ultimate
Hmm.
thing.
Love
So
that.
first of all, we hope like through discussion, through political or philosophical or just any conversation, first and foremost we want to open people's eyes, I guess, like give them the tools they need, and also the individual understanding that they require to create to first of all understand why the world is the way it is, and then we can focus on changing it. And then while that's happening, we don't want to like isolate people and be like, oh, just work on yourself, just work on yourself.
Yeah.
That's that I think
Don't
that's
get too lost in self work and self development. You're still part of a collective, and
yeah,
there's.
it's a
Hmm.
toxic thing. That's the sort of right wing culture, I think. It's just focus on yourself, like the individual above all, and stuff like that. But then the social aspect of the human being, I don't think it can be ignored. So we'll do that, but ensure that there's a balance in uh working on community, creating community, building relationships. So it's not just the individual, but it's also not just community, because this is like Nietzsche's idea of Nietzsche actually has a very interesting thing, because he really despises charity in many ways. He thinks it's rooted in pity,
Huh.
and
I
I
didn't know that about him.
yeah,
That's interesting.
it's you when you read Nietzsche, you really like raise your eyebrows. It's hard to not be angry, but he is very
I have to admit that I tried reading Nietzsche, and I was like, okay, maybe I should come back to him a little later in life
yeah, that's fair.
because a lot of his concepts were so difficult for me to just grasp. So I find this conversation really fascinating.
But he draws that distinction from charity, which is rooted in sort of a pity, like it's rooted in that sort of slave morality sort of thing. And then he talks about magnanimity, like magnanimousness, magnanimity, yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
which he sees as this. tendency of um, not necessarily self-sacrifice, but doing things that are not necessarily within your direct self-interest, but it's out of this understanding, and it's out of this just a purity of character that is not from like guilt or anything like it's just it's out of love, I guess you could say.
That's beautiful. From place of wanting and not being pushed
in many ways, yeah. Because Nietzsche really emphasizes that sort of passion, love, I guess you could say. And yeah, it's even he is not this like anti-communitarian, like just egoist. He would probably reject those labels, I would say. But yeah, I mean, I also don't want to emphasize that this is not it's not the Nietzsche's great club necessarily. We're not like gonna like quote Nietzsche in every speech or anything like that. It's just a place to draw inspiration, I guess.
Okay, so do you guys have some kind of credo that you created around Nietzschean ideas? Let's talk about that. Like,
yeah, it is still a work in progress, but the main thing is, I guess, just living well as a person, and then living well together as a society. That's kind of the main thing. It sounds a bit like broad, I guess, but I mean that is ultimately the fundamental needs of human beings, is just to live and love
prosper
and
as,
be loved. Exactly.
as an individual.
I guess you could say live long and prosper. That's
Yeah.
that's the
So
copyrighted creed.
yeah, so you're basically talking about community-based movement that focuses both on the individual and his place in the community, on how he could better the world around him. So I remember on our first conversation, we talked about a skill sharing community. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah. So right now our resources are limited on the activism side. So we right now we do like events for like learning and conversations and stuff like that, but I really want us to get more into the community building stuff. One of the ideas that we had is a sort of members skill sharing sort of round table, circle, whatever, where we out of like volunteering, we select one skill. It's not necessarily like the hugest thing, because obviously some stuff is way too specialized for something like this, but there's stuff that I think is very valuable skills that people learn and that can be taught fairly easily by the person who knows how to communicate them. So it helps the person obviously build the skills to communicate those skills, and then other people can partake in getting that. Like, for example, one thing that's very simple, you could say like, I don't know, I do soldering, for example. I do some microelectronic repair and stuff like that. And that's something that I think is fairly simple. I think I can teach it to people pretty easily. And I do have the equipment for it. I can, if I, for example, get provided a space, I can easily share that sort of skill. And there's stuff that I want to learn. I want to learn a bit more about writing. I want to learn a bit more about even public speaking. There's a lot of stuff that I would appreciate to learn, and I think there are people out there with those skill sets, and we can just exchange those skills.
Yeah, a mutual energy exchange between people.
Yeah, it's mutual benefit. That's the beauty of it. It's mutual benefit. It's not charity anymore. It's people coming together to benefit everyone.
That's beautiful. When people come together and everybody sees what is your strong sides, what are my strong sides, and how can we utilize our talents in order to make our community and society better through just sharing our knowledge and basically shining in our light, you know?
Yeah, for sure. That's like one of the ideas we had. I do want to emphasize physical activity as well. I think it's something that
Mm-hmm.
is very valuable. Like it's kind of the step one of sort of individual progress.
Yeah,
So
to be healthy for sure.
we have big goals for that, but for like for the early on, we're trying to organize a little hiking group. Just have like a monthly or
Love
weekly.
that. Count me in.
Yeah, like select the path. One person can suggest the path they if they are familiar with it, or if not, we can just decide together, and then we go on walks. We look at the nature around us, and we stay physically active. And that's just the start. They start with the stuff that's more accessible for us
Accessible,
based
yeah.
on the resources that we have currently, and hopefully, if it's popular, we can branch out into more aggressively demanding sort of things.
So we were talking also in our conversation about unionizing
Yep.
and the importance of it and the lack that we're experiencing right now in this aspect. So let's dive into that.
Yeah, I mean, the like union movement, the labor movement in North America has a very interesting history. It's definitely much further behind than, even though like some of the most historic like labor struggles in the world have been in the U.S. and Canada. Like the 5-day work week and the 8-hour
Yeah.
work day. All of those are achievements that were hard fought for, like with blood and tears.
For sure. Some individuals even today, you mentioned the word union and they're starting to sweat.
Yeah, they
know?
think of the like the picket lines and the
Don't mention we're not unionizing.
but I think it's I mean, we see how well it works in Europe. Like a lot of these European countries, I see people point out and say, "Oh, why do we need a minimum wage? Like Sweden doesn't have a minimum wage and they get paid very well." And it's like, well, yeah, but that country is like 85% unionized. Like 85% of every workplace is unionized, and
Power in the masses.
it's the ultimate form of that because I mean, these are the people who are doing the work. These are the people who build everything. Build the famous song goes, they build the factories, they dug the main mine shafts, but because it's their work, they have every right to work among themselves. Because it's funny, because the workplace is all dependent on a well-ticked, like well-oiled machine of cooperation between the workers, but then cooperation in terms of their like interests is demonized, and that's ridiculous, because workers also get the best sort of benefit for themselves if they cooperate in those aspects as well.
Yeah.
So I really think that's one of the most important things we can go for, and it's people are like, oh, I'm against big government, stuff like that, where they're like more anarchist or more conservative. That's the ultimate way of doing it. It's much better than the minimum wage, which is I mean, it's better than no minimum wage, but it's definitely better if people can negotiate for their wages based on what they're worth together.
Exactly.
Right? So the unionism is very important. I'm hoping someday, I'm a member of the IWW. It's the International Workers of the World. It's a cross-sectoral union. I'm hoping we can get them involved, and maybe they can give us some seminars about unionizing, just provide some benefit in that aspect as well. But
how do you think it could benefit us here today, just unionizing?
well, one of the main things, I mean, obviously the money is a pretty big deal. Like people's wages are like, real wages are declining because inflation is so high. People's buying power is like lowering every day, and at the end of the day, money is required for us to live. It's a requirement in the modern day, but it's so much more than that. I think one of the biggest things is just having a say over your workplace. Our workplace is where we spend 1/3 or even sometimes half our day
For
in.
sure.
And
most of our lives.
yeah, it's the most directly consequential to our lives. And the way traditional workplaces are structured, people have no say. It's tyrannical in a way.
Yes.
It's autocratic to the nth degree. So unions are one arm of building a more democratic structure by giving the people who work in the workplace a say in how it's run, in how uh, their work is structured, their work hours, their schedules, their shifts, stuff like that. I think those are fundamental rights that are like trampled over today, and with unions, with the help of unions, we can regain some of those rights.
So basically, taking the power away from the machine and giving it back to the people so they can decide how their life is going to look, basically. Still being part of a workforce and driving the world forward, but having much more control over how their daily life looks.
Yeah, and there's also other stuff threatening work, like the we saw in the Hollywood strikes with the SAG-AFTRA, the threat of like machine learning replacing
Oh,
writers and
AI is
entertainment.
coming for all of us.
Yeah, so that sort of stuff, and because it's not even just about the workers, it's about like consumers as well, because that sort of thing, that sort of process of this, just the machine that just churns out new materials, stuff like that, that's not what people want. That's not what I think media has. I think our people's appreciation of media has declined a lot more.
Mhm.
Um, that after it has been corporatized, I think it's not seen as much about as an art as it should be. That's another part of us like being atomized and losing our sort of sense of community, is just it's not seen as art, it's not seen as communication, it's not as appreciated if it has a message, if it how that message is delivered. um but yeah, I think it all cycles back into each other.
Yeah.
That's why it's connected. That's because even if you live your best life, make a shit ton of money, like I don't know, but live in like the best luxury apartment,
Lavish.
yeah, eat the best meals, like do whatever, and but then there is just no human connection. There is nothing
Yeah.
of the sort.
You're,
It's
you're a slave to that cycle anyway.
yeah, it just becomes this routine that, and people get used to that sort of stuff. It is stuff that is ultimately meaningful, is I think that
Yeah.
connection, and some the power, essentially the power in shaping your surroundings and shaping your social I don't think that's something that can be taken, that drive, the will to power, what Nietzsche would say. I don't think that's something that can be just taken away from the individual. It's ultimately something that will reassert itself as a force.
I think that's the illusion of consumerism, that all of us, we think that by consuming more and having more and working more towards having more, it's an illusion, because we think that we're consuming whatever the machine produces, but by the end of it, we're just batteries for the machine. you know
Yeah, I think uh, restoring a lot more um, individual labor, like restoring I think restoring a lot more artisanship is very
hmm
important, as opposed to just consuming, buying the new iPhone every time, and
yeah.
then throwing it away and then buying a new one. And what's interesting is that a lot of our character, a lot of our personality has become this um essentially what we have become, what we consume in a lot of ways.
Oh,
Our
for
a lot
sure.
of the way we identify is about what we consume, and I think that's a bit destructive. There's definitely better ways to create that sense of self than that.
Yeah. So what I love about connecting to younger generations is the fact that you're not in the race yet.
Yeah.
You could still look forward and see what you're about to step into, and being a critical thinker. I bet you see all of that and you go like, no, 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 no. Stop the horses. I want out. So, we've been talking about that it's time to start building a new future, and rebuilding the missing human element that we've lost through consumerism, through the machine being as big and terrible as it is. So, when you look at the future and how rapidly the world is shifting and changing, and technologies and everything around you, like what scares you the most about growing up into that?
Yeah, I mean, the scariest thing really is just it's just the isolation. I think as much as it's fearful, like, I mean, there's much like horrid stuff happening in the world today,
Yeah.
but like I think it's just so sad that that's those sort of that social fabric that seems so strong, like, is just disintegrating, and it's disintegrating under a lot of pressure,
Oh
from
yes.
all different sort of aspects. But um, it's like people. I feel I feel sad that I think people won't be able to experience a lot of the stuff that we used to appreciate and experience. And I think that's fundamentally, like, under my, like, moral framework, I could say, like, I consider myself more of a consequentialist. I care about the outcomes of life and stuff like that. But in the in that sense, like, those experiences, those connections, and even like the suffering necessarily, but a sort of suffering that is like helps us build character, I think that sort of stuff is not as appreciated anymore. There is either sedation,
Mm-hmm.
and like numbness,
Yeah.
or there is a sort of fake euphoria, I guess, which is just through like rapid consumption, like instant gratification, stuff like that.
Yeah, and we're being emotionally desensitized as
Yeah,
human beings, you know.
definitely.
Nowadays, consuming media that shows you so much of the terrible stuff going in this world, you know, and just looking at the stuff that's being basically shoved down our throats, it just does so much damage to our emotional world and creates that disconnect between what used to be sacred to us as humans before, right?
I don't want to like do the nostalgia thing. Oh, the past was better. There's definitely some aspects that was more uh appreciated, but I
Mm-hmm.
think there was also a lot of stuff that held us back. And what we need to do is create the new sort of order of things. Just I mean, it gets very abstract, but I like, and I don't want it to be abstract, because there are concrete things we can do. We talked a lot, a few of them, and they just make life so much better for
Yeah.
a lot of people. And by doing those things and by being aware of the broader implications of those things, we can, mitigate a lot of the really horrible stuff that's
Yeah.
gonna happen. That's gonna happen if people don't like do their do the
Lower the damage levels,
yeah, for
basically.
sure. Do some mitigation, I guess. Yeah, that's just generally it. Like, I don't have this all-encompassing fear. Like, I guess there's stuff that like there's anxieties that come and go, but that's ultimately that's what I find the most sad. If people are just gonna be isolated and, uh, you know, I mean, a lot of the sort of fabric of comfort that we appreciate is definitely not going to last very long. So I do want us to be ready for that as well. With climate change, with stuff like that, there's going to be so much more radicalism, which is not
Oh
necessarily a
yeah.
bad thing, but radicalism, of course, entails an upset sort of order of things. And in that, I want, when shit hits the fan, I guess I want us to be ready to make things better and reshape
Mm-hmm.
it to a better place, rather than it just all falling down and collapsing into something a
And
lot
us
worse.
running around like headless chickens,
Yeah,
not knowing
exactly.
what to do. It's time to unite right now and find some necessary solutions for our situation. So, Soroush, let's think hypothetically. If, like, first of all, let me ask you, if you would have a direct communication with the leaders of this world, what do you think they need to be focusing now more than ever?
Hmm. That's tough because I think a lot of those issues are a lot more systemic than just the individual people who are on top. But there's definitely a lot of things they can do. I think the main thing is focus on building, like changing the systems that you have taken, like raise your understanding of them, and then just I mean, one thing is just stop doing what you're doing right now, but also
Stop, halt.
but also it's understand the systems that you're under and understand what influences are sort of the perverse influences that are making things go awry, and just disempower them as much as possible. Like there's just so much corporate influence as an example. There's so much like nationalist fervor, there's so much religious fervor, there's so much dogma that's like, and these are systems that are long lasting, they're self perpetuating, they're not simple things to dismantle. But as one person who has amassed a decent amount of power, that's the sort of thing you can do, is disempower them and also talk about them very like transparently. Don't just, you know, make the same promises. Don't just come over here and act like everything's totally fine. Acknowledge the problems and then do your best to solve them. Because like, I don't think if tomorrow like every president became like a good person became the president of every country, I don't think like things would change that much, honestly. Because those incentives that exist under the circumstances, first of all, they're like horse blinders. They only point you to certain directions for solutions, and also like the incentives are just corrupt. It's a machine. You can't change one cog and expect everything to be fixed.
So we'll have to basically re-educate the community around not even new concepts, but maybe concepts that are long forgotten to us, that bring us together and create a better society. So what are these concepts that we're talking about, basically? What is it that humanity is lacking at the moment that we should emphasize?
I think one of the main things is just taking the world as it is head on, like not distracting yourself. I mean, everyone's guilty of that, but we should try and minimize that.
Look status quo in the eye, guys.
Yeah, in our personal lives, we should just like, understand how the things are, every aspect of it. Don't deny like your emotions, don't deny like certain parts of your personality. Accept them the way they are, first and foremost.
Precisely.
And then once you have an understanding of your inner mechanism, you can begin by like changing stuff, making stuff better,
spreading out.
but you have to do it. You shouldn't do the slave morality thing of, oh well, I have this aspect of myself, I think it's bad now, but I guess it's actually good, and then just erase,
convenient.
Erase the title of the question, expect it to be gone. Accept the problems and then work on fixing them without guilt, without stuff like that. And then that same principle can be applied to like the world as a whole. But one thing I want to emphasize is look at things systemically and don't essentialize. Don't say, oh, this is the way it is because that's just how the way it is. Look more deeply into
ask questions.
Look more deeply into the institutions that take such huge parts of your life, that occupy so much of your life, and look into the incentives, look into the interests. Who is it benefiting? Who
follow the money?
Yeah, that's a big part of it. Yeah, but it's also not just that. Like, it's not. Don't essentialize the money either. Don't essentialize the people on top as they're evil and that's why they're on top and they ruin everything because they're evil. It's never that simple. You have to understand the mechanism, and I advocate a more critical theory, I guess you could say, more dialectical understanding of power. And once you understand that, we can build our own power structures with incentives on our interest as a whole, and that do not create like conflicting dichotomies. We create structures like the mutual aid structures that are beneficial to everyone and do not create conflicting interests. And by expanding those sorts of systems, that's how we can bring about real change.
Okay. Another question, because I want to touch on something you said before about the fear of isolation. It's a little bit surprising to me because I would expect a younger generation to be more connected, because looking back at when I was young, I had my group of friends around me. Like, it was hard to feel lonely back then. And it seems like right now the younger generation does feel isolated. Like, it feels like you guys are the same boat with us. Like, we don't have the time or the means to create new connections, but you are in schools, you're still in the education system. Like, where is it that you feel this isolation? Where do you feel like it's coming from?
I think it's a lot better for younger people than like people in their like mid 20s. I think people who are
Mm-hmm.
just out of school, that's definitely the most lonely demographic.
Mm.
But first of all, right now COVID happened.
Oh,
A lot
yes.
of the opportunities for socializing have just been erased, I guess.
Yeah.
And then I think there's a lot of and then as I said before, like the infrastructure is just hostile to like socializing in general. It's everything is just built for cars. There's barely any space to walk, let alone a space for people to hang out. In fact, in a lot of places, just hanging out is basically criminalized. It's like,
Mm.
oh, loitering, or whatever laws that
Yeah,
are
that's
created
absurd.
because of racism, originally. Like, if you look into the origin of these laws, these are to criminalize certain types of
Yeah.
people from just existing in public at all. But it has backlash to everyone, because everyone, it's a chilling effect. It
Yeah.
targets a group of people, but it also affects everyone as well. um, and then there is an inherent like aspect of like capitalism, which is people just don't see their place of work as a as part of their lives. Even it's like
Yeah.
it has become this alien thing that you just have to do to survive, and people like hate it with all passion. There's socializing in the workplace is just completely denied, because
There's a different culture in the workplace.
we have to
Mm-hmm.
focus just on productivity. Don't
Yeah.
talk to your coworkers. Don't even dare like discuss your personal life or your job with your coworkers, because then you might do something that we don't like. Um,
And that's a missed opportunity, right? Because if you would put the effort on changing culture within workplaces, you could get so much more from the individual and the collective all together, because productivity rises, people are more happy, and people go back home and advocate for their workplace as this another safe space where they get to self-develop, where they get to express, where they get to grow, like their second family, which could create a much happier society by the end of it.
I mean, it's like a place where you're forced to interact with other people, and somehow
Forced. Fun.
no one finds like any sort of social satisfaction from it. So
Yeah.
there's something very wrong in that sort of circumstance, and it is ultimately rooted in whose incentives the
Yeah.
workplace is meant to serve, and it's not meant to serve the interests of the people who work there. It's meant to serve the interests of the people who own the place. And they just want to make money. They don't care about that, and they also don't want their position threatened, so they keep people isolated as much as possible. And then I think there is this. I think a lot of people downplay how much social media contributes to it, especially now with the algorithms, with the
Oh, the algorithm.
yeah.
My favorite word. I am the algorithm for all I care.
Yeah, like it just sends people into like certain groups. And then there's a lot of study into the sociology of it. There's a famous French philosopher, Jean Baudrillard. He talked about how if social media like creates one-dimensional like portraits of people that are not really them. So there's just an instant barrier where people interact through avatars of themselves instead of actual human interaction. It
Yeah.
becomes much more difficult to break that barrier to and actually arrive at social interaction. And then the anonymity and stuff like that, it just so you can get a lot of the gratification of socializing without really building the connections that make it very beneficial to you in the long term. And it incentivizes interaction in real life because there's so much more at stake, I guess you could say. It's a more video gamified, less consequential way of socializing. So our brain, it's just developed in a way that really likes low risk, low reward instead of high risk, high reward. So it appreciates that more than social interaction in the real world. And because of that, we have very like cultural tendencies that I think are very much too accepted. Like and this is something I mean, this is a bit more questionable, but people talk about, introverted and like extroverted, ambiverted. I think a lot of this is us justifying and like sort of creating a taxonomy to just justify the way we like have gotten used to the world working, the way we have gotten used to our interactions. I think, and this is like, if you read a little bit of Foucault, he talks about this pathologizing of like personality and creating it into this sort of psychological fabric of illnesses, and all of that is also based on the structure of power and what like I mean, I don't want to get too much into this, but he talks about how some people, like a person who might be considered crazy today, like the way their behavior is considered crazy and they're ostracized because of it, might have been before the sort of like the pathologized fabric that we have created, might have been the most fascinating person in the village, the guy who everyone went to talk to because they had so many out there ideas, or they thought in such a unique way. And then under today, it gets like categorized into this same. I think the best example of it is autism. I think autism is the best example of something that's categorized. And I mean, there's distinct ways of how it works, but the social construct of the diagnosis is it's all psychology is, it's based on how well you can function in society the way it works today,
Yeah.
as opposed to how if that I wonder if it's better to question if, is society better the way it is, or is the fact that so many people fall into the dysfunctional sort of mind space under this circumstance, that it's society that needs to change, not these individuals who need to change to conform to society the way it is today. But these are like broader conversations, and they're much more nuanced. I'm not a psychologist, I don't know enough about it to and I would love to discuss it with psychologists, but that's it's there's this pathologizing of behavior, there's this categorization, this justification of, I think, not very beneficial behavior in a
Yeah.
lot of ways. So yeah.
So we have two sides of the same coin, right? First of all, to circle back to what you said before about accepting ourselves, but then if you're lacking as a person, or if you have lower morals, is it the right thing to do to just accept yourself as you are and say, well, I'm shitty, but this is me, Or on the other hand, we're trying to create this whole new avatar of who we're supposed to be, but then we're not really that. So it's really easy to get lost in all of that, because I feel like the world has so many expectations of us, of who we need to be, what role we need to be playing. And a lot of young people are just lost in what is it that they need to be doing? Who is it that they need to become? So you have those that are just blindly accepting of themselves without necessarily looking into a way to develop and grow and become better. And you have those who are just not accepting of who they are and just create this another reality where it's just like a video game. So where do you see that happen in the world, and what do you think about that?
To be honest, I think I don't think these things are separate. I think
Mm-hmm.
these things are like it's weird because they feed off of each other. It's
Yeah.
behaviors. There's so like people I see people, especially online, and I have spent a lot of time online in very like strange spaces on the internet because it's fascinating to me the way like those communities
Yeah.
develop in their own isolation. But I see people like that are overwhelmed with like guilt and like shame and
Mm-hmm.
like insanely terrible self-image, and then they also do the sort of uh oh, but that's fine, but that's oh, it's not me who is wrong, it's everyone else who is wrong, but
Mm.
also I'm a piece of
I'm the
shit.
product of life.
Which is true. I mean, everybody is at the end of the day a
Yeah.
product of their environment and their conditions, but that doesn't mean you can't do anything about it. So that doesn't mean like you have to give up and then just live life and then accept who you are as a cog in the machine. When I say about like accepting reality, what I mean is don't ignore things about it, or
Yeah.
don't create alternatives to it.
Don't lie to yourself.
Yeah, it's only what's real, past and present and future.
Yeah.
The past is what happened. The current is how things are. Why am I saying this? Is obvious, obviously, but it's the future that needs changing. There's no alternate version of the present where things are better because you look at it a different way.
Through a filter.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I'm just a huge advocate for these two concepts. First of all, of accepting who you are and looking at the reality around you and just accepting where you're at. And it doesn't matter if you're at the pit bottom where everything around you is dark, or you're in a penthouse living your life, It's just look at the mirror, accept reality as is, and also be authentic. Be authentic. Be who you are, but constantly look at ways of improvement and understand that accepting who you are, it's a process, it's a journey. I talk a lot about it in my channel, that the journey of accepting who you are it takes a lot. It's the integration of all parts of you, your lights and your shadow, and that's exactly the door that leads you out of guilt and shame and feeling that you're not worthy, not sufficient, not good enough to be part of society. And that's the point where you start to create around yourself all this alternative reality, when you start lying to yourself about who you are and who you need to be. And this is such a dangerous thing, to be lying to yourself, because you're not accepting of the reality around you and you're not giving yourself any opportunity to grow. So what do you think is the best way for us to just look at things as they are? Because it could be very painful. I remember my awakening. I think about your age, when I was 20 and I started seeing how the world actually looks. It was a very painful process. How do you think we could slide into that transformation and that mind shift a little easier, especially being a younger person?
I think the best way to do it is by doing things, creating things, essentially. Whether it's art, whether it's like writing, whether it's machinery, even, because that forces you to interact with the world how it is. If you don't accept, if I want to get a very mechanical example, if you don't accept the way certain how like a hinge is made, if you don't accept the theories behind it, if you don't understand the physics of it and create an alternative version of it, you will never be able to build a hinge. You will only be able to fail and fail, but that forces you to interact with reality. And it's
Yeah.
the same way in a lot of other sorts of stuff. When you write, the feedback you get, that's if you want to improve, if you want to interact with others through your art, you need to accept first of all, I mean, the mechanics of painting. You can't, someone can't be like, oh, I can just psychically paint and the painting just appears. I sleep and tomorrow I wake up and the painting has just been projected from my mind onto the canvas through whatever process. Um, and then once you show off that painting of yours, you get feedback for it, and that, I mean, that doesn't guarantee that you accept reality, but it creates that dissonance. And I'm gonna say everyone, if you isolate yourself enough, everyone will just create this fictional world. It's impossible without interacting with the world. It's impossible not to get false ideas on how it works. So I advocate praxis, essentially, or practice, you could say as well. It's by doing things, by interacting with the world, by building things like, from like, I don't know, wood carving to building a social club.
Yeah.
All of that.
Put down your phones. Put down the goddamn TikToks.
All of that is the main way of, I guess, becoming authentic, as you said. Because at the end of the day, I think it is much more true that we are what we create. We find the most satisfaction. Yes. And that's the sad thing is, work used to be, well, for a lot of people, like, I guess a slave wouldn't have had as much ownership over the product of his work. But especially in like the pre-modern era, work, especially artisanal work, like being a blacksmith, being a leather worker, something like that, was it was your life. That's why, like, a lot of people's last names are the sorts of job that they have been doing in their family history. It's because it was what you identified with. It was, you identified with your craftsmanship, with what you create, and that gave so much satisfaction to those people. But that's robbed of us because, well, first of all, because the way labor is divided today, everything has so many parts going into it. But that's not just it, because if we, for example, had a sense of community in our workplace, we would accept ourselves as a part of that production process. We were the expert on that one specific thing. We helped out in that one specific sort of sector, and we would see ourselves in the output of that work. That's why a lot of people, that's why, like, this sort of dream, the aspiration is to start your own business, because then when you do something like that, you gain this sense of dignity through creating something.
Oh,
but
I love that.
Then most people don't get that opportunity because the way society is structured, it requires that underclass of just people who perform a meaningless labor, as in it has no meaning to them as a part of their character. No
passion.
Yeah.
So I love it that you said that we need to develop, maybe I'm using the wrong idea around it, but develop some kind of mastery, and really start creating something with your own hands. I feel like it will affect so many other things in your life. First of all, it will really develop your sensitivity as a person, because you will be in charge of so many processes that happen within the creation of what you're putting out there in the world. And it's so important nowadays to be connected to your sensitivity, to your senses, to your feelings as a person. I feel like society nowadays is, like I said before, we're so desensitized. I feel like we're taking away, into the slumber of the media and all of that, away from what makes us human. So it is very important to start creating something with your own hands. I love the fact that you created the Nietzschean Club, and I want to circle back to that, and talk a little bit about that. This space that you have created, who would you say is the perfect target audience for that club?
That's a good question. Actually, one of the main people I wanted to appeal to, I wanted to be very diverse, and like I wanted to be some place where everyone can appreciate what comes out of it. But one like demographic that I did want to appeal to especially was young men, like young men, just that. Because I mean, you mentioned like sensitivity and stuff. Our socialization as men is instantly a huge like disadvantage when it comes to being sensitive or
Yeah, for sure.
having an appreciation for feelings or emotions. It's just antagonized in the masculine
Yes.
experience. And
Portrayed as poison masculinity,
yeah, exactly.
toxic.
Which is funny because I mean, let's go back to Nietzsche, for example.
Hmm.
Nietzsche, he was the, I mean, Ubermensch. You say it's the overman. He really appreciated masculinity in a lot of ways. I mean, sometimes to his detriment, but uh, even then, he wasn't like, oh yeah, he hated stoicism. He hated this idea of just being this unreactive, uncaring sort of stone statue. He I mean, he argued for a more like sort of Greek understanding of emotions, where passion, strong emotion is masculine. That's kind of
Mm.
the Greek sort of understanding.
Love that.
Yeah, and I think that's appreciable, and I think that's something that can be very productive, especially because the way traditional gender is being challenged in the modern day. I mean, there's the reactionary aspect of, oh, return with a V, just go back to the way things were because we were more comfortable back then. But it's an opportunity for a real sort of liberation that can, we can let go of a lot of those toxic elements and create this new sort of thing, a new masculinity in a lot of ways. That's not, I mean, people talk about new male, and that's like a derogatory thing, but it doesn't have to be this. It doesn't have to be like feminization, I guess. A lot of
Hmm.
people think about it like that, but not that there's anything wrong with being feminine. It's just the way we're brought up. A lot of men we do aspire to be masculine, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that, as long as it's in a healthy way, a healthy sort of masculinity that I think a lot of people can come to appreciate. And at the end of the day, again, it comes back to the don't essentialize thing. By understanding a lot of those social forces that I hope to help expound on, by understanding a lot of those social forces, uh, we can also change the system of the social construct of gender in a way that's more productive for human beings and doesn't cause as much anguish as it does in the world today. But yeah.
So I really want to finish this episode with a call to action for the young men that are listening to us. So the Young Nietzschean Club, what would they expect to find there if they want to join you guys?
um I'm hoping everyone who joins, I'm hoping that there's a lot of uh I'm hoping that there's a lot of like challenging your own expectations, your or the like. I want open mindedness. That's what I will say, because when I read Nietzsche, I was offended. I was genuinely offended by a lot of the sort of ideas that he put forward, and I do want that. I think that's the first step, is to come and be like confronted with very stuff that shakes you to your core, I guess, to some degree.
That's
Um,
very healthy for you.
yeah, and then from then we can help build. First of all, we can help understand the systems that have arrived us at the place we are today,
Yeah.
and like I think. It's not appreciated. Like people like make fun. Oh, you have a gender studies degree or some shit like that. It's very much like demean, but there's so much beautiful stuff that you can learn about human psychology in
Oh, for
that sort of
sure.
thing. So we're gonna focus on learning that, and then focus on how modern like to do some anthropology, how modern gender like our modern understanding of gender has came to be, And then from there, and also the societal aspect of capitalism, how that interacts with masculinity, like the patriarchal or breadwinner archetype. And then from that we can build a platform for this sort of new masculinity, this healthy
Mm-hmm.
masculinity, which is rooted in action. It's rooted in uh, a genuine self appreciation, and a genuine appreciation of all aspects, all emotional, like, because the only emotion that is accepted for men to feel is anger. It's that's the only thing that men are expected. But
Yes.
that sort of, again, that sort of Greek understanding of the masculinity, I think is a lot healthier in that sense. But I don't want to this is not a boys club by any means. I really want to appeal to women as well, and I want to ensure that it's, a fair, equitable, like, again, don't essentialize. Everyone's a person. Everyone's an individual, but they have their own experiences. They have unique ways that they have interacted with society, the systems of society. That needs to be respected, and then from there we can do the challenging stuff, I guess.
And it's a round table, so everybody has a say, everybody has a place. It's a safe space to express and to ask questions and to develop your ideas.
Yeah, everyone who becomes a member, and we will eventually get to taking membership fees, because a lot of the stuff that we want to organize is not going to be
Yeah, for sure.
but once I find a way to be as transparent as possible about it, we will get a treasury committee. We'll figure that out, and everyone will be democratically elected. We will change people over the in short terms and stuff. That stuff we do need to figure out, but everyone who becomes a member has an equal vote on all matters, and then they also have an equal vote for committee positions. So, and then we elect committees, we determine the size of committees, and from there it's just pure liquid democracy, the way it's called, I guess.
That's awesome. So, Soroush, I asked you this question before, and I'm going to ask it now on this podcast. If I would have given you, let's say, $1 million to do whatever you want with it, to put it into the Nietzschean Club and to create the future that you want to be creating, and really, give your mission wings, what you would be doing? What is it that you're going to focus on?
It's gonna be hardcore community outreach. Like, one of the biggest things that we want to do is I really hope to make I really appreciate how a lot of like fraternal organizations and like Christian charities are structured, like the YMCA, for example. I really like that sort of idea, of like uh promoting physical health and then also promoting the right sort of message. So I do hope that we can create like cooperative sort of systems. One thing I would really like is like a literal gym, like the Young Nietzschean Club gym, or whatever, or
Mm-hmm.
that's the work in progress name, I guess. But I want something like that, but it's not going to be isolated to that. I want, one of the biggest things I want is something called a worker consumer hybrid, and it's going to be a partnership where it's collectively owned not only by the workers but also the people who buy things there, which can include the
Mm.
workers as well. And you pay like a membership, and then you get access to all the goods. You get decision on like what stuff is stocked, and because of the way the incentive structures of that is developed, it's not as much for profit anymore. It's more about what's the most beneficial for the people who work there and the people who buy things from there. So because of that, it's just inherently a more community oriented sort of thing. And we, because of that, we get not only cheaper prices and stuff like that, but we can really get in touch with what people want, and also make an example to show that this sort of organization works. And not all workplaces need to be this tyrannical, top to bottom, profit share, profit or like shareholder profit oriented
Yeah.
organizations. And I want to make it really challenging for the powers that be, I guess you could say, because once these services are provided, and it's proven that this sort of organization is more beneficial, other organizations will have to come to and try and at least emulate what we are doing. And that's how like real societal changes develop. And then I want like a credit union, which is basically that but for a bank. I want like one thing we were inspired by some activist groups in America is like a sort of a volunteer dental clinic where doctors can volunteer and help.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah, and because that's such a huge, and in America that used to be a like a clinic for everything, but right now we have luckily we have government healthcare, but dental is still not covered. So just create that for people to get their teeth fixed or whatever. And then because of that, and because of the radicalism that we push, because of the shift in societal expectations, the government will have to respond to that in some way. And I'm hoping that that response is, actual dental coverage under the OHIP insurance system.
Lead by example.
Exactly, yeah. Because if you give people a service, the people on top, the capitalist or the government official, they thank you. Oh, so how kind of you to be charitable. But if you give them a service and then tell them, oh, why have you asked why this is not already a thing? Then people start getting nervous over that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So that's the sort of stuff, just community-oriented systems. And these require capital. Hopefully one day we will have enough to invest in that sort of thing. But we'll start small. We'll build the systems. And these systems will be hopefully around long after all of us are gone. And their influence will just stay.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Live long and prosper, my friend.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm really rooting for you guys.
Thank you. I hope that phrase doesn't get us in trouble.
No, I'm sure it won't, because it is what it is. We're here to create a better tomorrow. We're here to create a better future for the younger generations and for those who are still here and anticipating a better tomorrow for all of us. So I love what you're doing. I love your mission that you're on. I love the vision that you have for the future. And I really hope that the Nietzschean Club, the Young Nietzschean Club, gets to really grow into what it needs to be in order to create the changes that we want to see in society and in the world. So, Soroush, thank you so much for this fascinating, amazing conversation. I learned so much today, and it just makes me so happy to see young people such as yourself do something. Kind of lift this veil of TikToks and media and really get to do real actions out there in the world to create this wonderful ripple effect that will definitely affect a lot of stuff around you and will create a different reality for all of us. So thank you so much, and I hope to have you here again. Oh, because I would love to pick your brain on more and more and more. So thank you again.
Fantastic. It was such a pleasure. I'm sorry I talked so much, but that's just kind of how...
No, it was amazing. Oh my God, I could listen to you literally for hours. So yeah, we will definitely have another episode because there's much to talk about, especially getting into action and, really inviting people into this wonderful, wonderful opportunity, men and women alike. If you want to join the Young Nietzschean Club and learn about how the system works, instead of reading all the books and feeling lost and consuming media and listening to everything the TV tells you, here's an opportunity to get together with real people, young people who have their eyes wide open to what is happening around them, and it's truly inspiring. So yeah, I hope that people get the chance to use this opportunity and hop on board. Thank you so much, Soroush.
Thank you. Thanks as well.
Amazing. Bye, everybody.